You spend so much time waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity, the right person to believe in you, that you forget the most important work was never out there. It was always within you. The truth is, nobody is coming to build your confidence, fix your habits, or fight your battles. Life quietly watches to see whether you will stay comfortable with who you are or become relentless about who you could be. Working on yourself is not a trend, it's a confrontation. With your excuses, your fears, your discipline, and your standards. It's waking up when you don't feel like it, choosing growth when comfort is begging you to stay the same, and deciding that your future deserves a stronger version of you. Because the moment you stop looking around for change and start looking in the mirror, that's the moment your life begins to transform. There comes a moment in every person's life when the excuses stop sounding convincing and the silence gets honest. It's the moment you realize that the rescue you were hoping for isn't coming. No perfect opportunity, no sudden breakthrough, no person who will step in and carry the weight for you. And that realization can feel heavy at first, almost unfair, until you understand that it's actually freedom. Because if no one is coming to save you, then no one is stopping you either. Your life is no longer in someone else's hands. It never was. The power you kept searching for in other people has been sitting quietly inside you, waiting for you to claim it. Taking responsibility is not about blame, it's about ownership. It's about looking at your situation, the mistakes, the delays, the missed chances, the habits you know are holding you back, and saying, "This is mine to fix." That kind of honesty is uncomfortable because it removes the safety net of excuses. You can't point to your past, your circumstances, or the people who doubted you. You can only point to your choices from this moment forward. But that's where strength is born. The instant you accept that your discipline determines your direction, you stop feeling like a victim of life and start becoming the architect of it. Working on yourself requires a level of courage most people avoid because it demands consistency when nobody is watching and effort when there is no applause. It's choosing to wake up earlier, to push a little harder, to learn when it would be easier to scroll, to stay focused when distractions are everywhere. It's not glamorous. It's repetitive, quiet, sometimes lonely work. But every small promise you keep to yourself rebuilds trust within you. And that self-trust becomes confidence. Not loud confidence that seeks attention, but steady confidence that doesn't need validation. As you continue, something shifts. The problems that once intimidated you start to look smaller, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. You begin to understand that resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you train. Every time you refuse to quit, every time you choose growth over comfort, you are reinforcing the identity of someone who handles what comes their way. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That question alone turns obstacles into preparation. And eventually, you look back at the person you used to be, the one who waited, who hesitated, who doubted, and you barely recognize them. Not because life suddenly became perfect, but because you did the work. You showed up for yourself when it would have been easier not to. You stopped waiting for permission to change. That is the quiet transformation most people never see, but it's the one that changes everything. When you accept that no one is coming to save you, you stop living like someone who needs saving and start living like someone who is in command of their own life. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are unreliable. Some mornings you wake up energized, convinced that this is the day you change everything. Other mornings, the alarm feels heavier than your goals, and the fire you had yesterday is nowhere to be found. If your progress depends on how you feel, you will always be at the mercy of moods you can't control. That's why discipline matters. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It tells you what needs to be done. It turns action into a decision instead of a debate. When you remove the daily argument in your mind about whether you should show up, you conserve energy for the work itself. The people who transform their lives are not the most inspired. They are the most consistent. They understand that waiting to feel ready is a trap. Readiness is built through repetition, not emotion. Every time you show up without motivation, you are training your mind to operate on command, not comfort. You are proving to yourself that you are dependable, that your word to yourself means something. That kind of self-respect cannot be given to you by applause or recognition. It is earned in private moments when quitting would be easier and nobody would know the difference. Discipline also builds resilience because it forces you to confront resistance daily. You learn that discomfort is not a warning sign to stop, but a signal that you are stretching beyond your current limits. Instead of fearing hard days, you start expecting them. You prepare for the moments when your energy is low, when distractions are loud, when progress feels slow. And because you expect those moments, they don't break you. You move through them with a quiet determination, understanding that consistency on the hardest days creates results the easiest days never could. Over time, discipline reshapes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who executes. Your standards rise because you no longer negotiate with laziness or procrastination. You become the person who does what they said they would do, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's boring, even when it feels like no one cares. That reliability becomes your edge. While others start and stop, you continue. While others wait for the perfect mood, you produce results. Eventually, something powerful happens. You no longer need motivation to begin because action itself creates momentum. The very act of starting generates the energy you thought you were missing. You realize that discipline was never a restriction. It was a form of freedom. It freed you from the cycle of inconsistency, from the frustration of unfinished goals, from the version of you that only worked when it was easy. And once you experience the stability that discipline brings, you understand that showing up on the days you don't feel like it is not a punishment. It is the proof that you are serious about becoming who you said you wanted to be. There is a quiet moment that most people try to avoid, a moment when you are alone with your thoughts and there is no distraction left to hide behind. It's the moment when you see yourself clearly, not the version you present to the world, not the potential you talk about, but the reality of your habits, your discipline, and your choices. Facing your truth in the mirror is uncomfortable because it strips away the stories you've been telling yourself. You can't pretend you're doing your best if you know you're cutting corners. You can't claim you want change if your actions are protecting the very patterns keeping you stuck. That honesty feels sharp at first, but it is also the doorway to real growth. Most people aren't held back by a lack of ability. They are held back by denial. It's easier to blame circumstances, timing, or other people than to admit that fear has been making decisions for you. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of discovering that change will require more from you than you expected. So you negotiate with yourself. You say tomorrow instead of today. You lower your standards just enough to stay comfortable. You convince yourself that small compromises don't matter, not realizing those compromises are slowly shaping your identity. The longer you avoid the truth, the more power those patterns gain. But the moment you confront it, the moment you say, "This is where I am, and this is what I need to fix," something shifts. Clarity replaces confusion. You stop wasting energy maintaining illusions and start directing it toward action. You begin to see your weaknesses not as permanent flaws, but as areas that require training. That shift in perspective is powerful because it turns self-criticism into self-awareness. Instead of tearing yourself down, you start building yourself up with intention. You become observant of your triggers, your routines, the environments that either strengthen or weaken your discipline. Facing your truth also demands accountability. It requires you to stop waiting for external pressure and start creating internal standards. You do the work not because someone is watching, but because you know who you are trying to become. That kind of accountability builds integrity, the alignment between what you say and what you do. And when that alignment strengthens, your confidence grows naturally. You trust yourself because you have evidence that you follow through, that you correct course when you slip, that you don't hide from your own reflection anymore. Over time, the mirror stops being something you fear and becomes something you respect. It reflects a person who is honest, disciplined, and self-aware. Not perfect, not flawless, but real and improving. You understand that growth was never about pretending to be better than you are. It was about being brave enough to see yourself as you are and committed enough to evolve. When you face your truth, you take back control of your direction. You stop drifting through life guided by excuses and start moving forward guided by purpose. And that is where genuine transformation begins. Not in public victories, but in private honesty. Comfort feels harmless because it doesn't announce its consequences right away. It whispers instead of shouts. It tells you to rest a little longer, to wait until conditions are perfect, to avoid the risk that might expose your weaknesses. Inside that space, nothing threatens you, but nothing strengthens you either. Days start to blend together. Effort becomes optional, and the urgency you once had slowly fades. You convince yourself that you're being patient, that you're preparing, that you'll move when the time is right. But deep down, you know the truth. You're staying where it's predictable because unpredictability demands courage. Growth has always required friction. Muscles strengthened by resistance, skills sharpened through repetition, character forms under pressure. When you remove all challenge from your life, you also remove the very forces that could transform you. The comfort zone becomes a place where your potential goes to sleep. You stop testing your limits, stop discovering what you're capable of, stop building the resilience that only struggle can produce. It's not that you can't leave, it's that the longer you stay, the more unfamiliar discomfort feels, until even small risks seem overwhelming. What makes this prison dangerous is that it often looks like stability from the outside. You might be doing enough to get by, enough to avoid criticism, enough to maintain the image that everything is fine. But inside, there is a quiet dissatisfaction, a sense that you are capable of more and not proving it to yourself. That feeling doesn't disappear on its own. It grows each time you ignore it, each time you choose ease over effort. Eventually, you start doubting whether you ever had the drive you once believed in, not realizing that it was simply buried under layers of convenience. Stepping out of that space is not a single dramatic act. It's a series of deliberate choices. It's choosing the task you've been postponing, initiating the conversation you've been avoiding, putting yourself in environments where you are not the most comfortable or the most certain. At first, it feels unnatural, even intimidating. Your mind searches for reasons to retreat because it prefers the familiar. But if you stay long enough in that discomfort, something changes. You adapt. What once felt difficult becomes manageable, and what once seemed impossible becomes part of your routine. With each step beyond what felt safe, your world expands. Your confidence stops being theoretical and becomes earned. You realize that fear was not a signal to stop, but an invitation to grow. The boundaries that once defined your life begin to dissolve, replaced by a wider sense of what you can handle. And you start to see comfort differently, not as a place to live, but as a place to visit briefly before moving forward again. Freedom comes when you no longer need everything to feel easy before you act. It comes when you trust your ability to handle what is unfamiliar, when you welcome challenges as opportunities to sharpen yourself. The comfort zone loses its grip the moment you stop treating it as protection and start recognizing it as limitation. Because the life you want does not exist inside the walls of what is safe. It exists just beyond them, waiting for the version of you that is brave enough to step outside. Your mind is the most powerful tool you have, but it can also become the most dangerous place you live if you leave it undisciplined. Every day, thoughts pass through it, shaping how you see yourself, how you interpret challenges, how you respond to pressure. If you don't learn to direct those thoughts, they begin to direct you. Doubt gets louder than confidence, fear speaks faster than logic, and temporary emotions start making permanent decisions. You may not even notice it happening at first. It feels like overthinking, like stress, like hesitation. But over time, it turns into a pattern where your reactions are no longer choices, they are impulses. Mastering your mind begins with awareness. You have to notice what you are telling yourself when things go wrong, when plans fail, when someone criticizes you, when you feel behind in life. Do you shut down or do you adapt? Do you assume defeat or do you search for solutions? The mind tends to repeat what it has practiced most. If you have practiced self-doubt, it will produce hesitation. If you have practiced resilience, it will produce determination. This is why mental discipline is not built in moments of crisis. It is built in everyday situations when you choose how to interpret what happens to you. Emotions are not enemies, but they are not reliable leaders either. Anger can push you to act recklessly. Fear can freeze you when movement is necessary. Excitement can make you commit to things you haven't thought through. When you let emotions drive without guidance, you surrender control of your direction. Mastery means creating a pause between what you feel and what you do. In that pause, you decide whether the reaction will move you forward or pull you backward. That pause is where strength lives. It allows you to respond instead of react, to remain steady when everything around you feels unstable. Training your mind also requires guarding what you expose it to, the conversations you entertain, the content you consume, the people you keep close. All of it influences your internal dialogue. If negativity surrounds you, it will eventually sound like your own voice. If discipline surrounds you, it will raise your standards without you noticing. You have to become selective, not out of arrogance, but out of protection for the focus you are trying to build. A strong mind is not just resilient against pressure, it is intentional about what it allows inside. As you develop this control, you start to notice a shift in how you carry yourself. Situations that once overwhelmed you become manageable because you no longer amplify them with panic or self-doubt. You think clearly under pressure. You recover faster from setbacks. You stop being ruled by every passing mood. Instead, you become grounded, deliberate, composed. People may see it as confidence, but it is really stability, the result of learning how to lead yourself from the inside. When you master your mind, you reclaim authority over your life. You stop being pulled in every direction by fear, distraction, or impulse. You move with intention, guided by principles instead of emotions. And once that control becomes part of who you are, no external chaos can easily shake you because the place you operate from is no longer fragile. It is trained, steady, and fully under your command. Pain has a way of getting your attention like nothing else can. It interrupts your routine, exposes your limits, and forces you to confront what comfort allowed you to ignore. Most people spend their lives trying to escape it, numbing it, or pretending it isn't there. But pain is not just something that happens to you. It is something that reveals you. It shows you where you are fragile, where you are unprepared, where you still have work to do. Avoiding it may give you temporary relief, but it also guarantees that the same weaknesses will be waiting for you later, often at a time when the stakes are much higher. Struggle is not a sign that you are failing. It is evidence that you are being challenged beyond your current capacity. Just like physical training breaks muscle before it rebuilds it stronger, life applies pressure to force growth. When you go through difficulty, you develop endurance, patience, and perspective that cannot be taught any other way. These qualities are earned through experience, not theory. You don't learn resilience by reading about it or talking about it. You learn it when you are tired, uncertain, and tempted to quit, yet you continue anyway. That process reshapes you from the inside. What makes pain valuable is the information it carries. It tells you what matters, what needs attention, what cannot continue the way it has been. Loss can teach you gratitude. Failure can teach you humility and preparation. Rejection can teach you independence. If you are willing to listen instead of resist, pain becomes instruction. It stops being something that only hurts and starts becoming something that guides. The people who grow the most are not the ones who suffer the least. They are the ones who extract meaning from what they go through and use it to adjust their path. There is also a quiet strength that forms when you stop running from hardship. You begin to trust your ability to endure. Situations that once would have overwhelmed you no longer have the same power because you have evidence that you can survive difficulty. That confidence is different from optimism. It is grounded in experience. You know that even if things go wrong, you will find a way through because you have done it before. Pain, in that sense, becomes preparation. It equips you for challenges you cannot yet see. Over time, you start to approach discomfort differently. Instead of asking why it is happening, you ask what it is trying to shape in you. You stop seeing obstacles as personal attacks and start seeing them as tests of your readiness. That shift removes the bitterness and replaces it with determination. You understand that the easy path rarely leads to transformation, and the difficult path often leads to strength you didn't know you had. Eventually, you realize that pain was never the enemy. Indifference, avoidance, and complacency were far more dangerous because they kept you stagnant. Pain forced movement. It forced awareness. It forced growth. And when you look back, the moments you once wished you could erase become the very moments that built your resilience, sharpened your character, and prepared you to handle life with a level of strength that comfort alone could never provide. Confidence that needs to be announced is often the kind that hasn't fully formed yet. It relies on attention, on reassurance, on constant reminders from the outside world that it exists. Quiet confidence is different. It doesn't rush to prove itself because it doesn't question its own foundation. It is built slowly through kept promises, disciplined habits, and moments when you chose growth instead of comfort. No one applauds those moments. Most of them happen in private, when the easier option was to stop and you didn't. Over time, those unseen decisions shape how you carry yourself without you needing to force it. You can recognize this kind of confidence in the way someone moves through uncertainty. They don't panic when plans change or when pressure rises. They assess, adjust, and continue. Their voice remains steady because it isn't driven by the need to dominate or impress. They listen more than they speak, and when they do speak, their words are deliberate. There is no rush to fill silence, no desperation to be noticed. That restraint comes from knowing that presence is not created by volume, but by clarity. Quiet confidence also shows in decision-making. Instead of being paralyzed by fear of judgment, you act according to your principles. You don't need everyone to agree with you because your direction is not based on approval. At the same time, you are not stubborn for the sake of pride. You remain open to learning, to adjusting when new information appears, because your identity is not threatened by change. That balance, firmness without arrogance, humility without insecurity, is what makes this kind of confidence so rare. It is built through preparation as much as experience. When you put in the work consistently, you remove the anxiety that comes from feeling unready. You walk into situations knowing you have done what you could to prepare, and that preparation creates calm. Even if the outcome is uncertain, you trust your ability to handle it. That trust becomes visible in subtle ways, in your posture, your eye contact, the patience in your reactions. You are no longer trying to convince others of your strength because you have already proven it to yourself. There is also a discipline to staying grounded when recognition does come. Loud praise can be as destabilizing as harsh criticism if you let it define you. Quiet confidence accepts both without becoming dependent on either. You appreciate acknowledgement, but don't chase it. You hear criticism, but don't crumble under it. Your sense of self remains steady because it was built internally, not assembled from opinions that can change overnight. As this confidence deepens, you realize that real power is subtle. It is the ability to remain composed when others are reactive, focused when others are distracted, patient when others are impulsive. It allows you to influence without forcing, to lead without demanding attention, to stand firm without aggression. People feel it even if they cannot explain it, because authenticity has a presence that performance cannot replicate. In the end, quiet confidence is not about appearing strong, it is about becoming stable. It grows from self-respect, from integrity, from the knowledge that you can rely on yourself when it matters. And once you have built that, you no longer need to announce who you are. It shows in how you walk into a room, how you handle adversity, and how you continue forward without needing the world to validate every step. Your life is a reflection of what you accept, not what you say you want. You can speak about goals, visualize success, and promise yourself that one day things will be different. But if your standards remain low, your reality will follow them. Standards are the invisible boundaries that define what you allow into your time, your environment, your relationships, and your habits. When those boundaries are weak, everything slips through. Distractions, negativity, mediocrity, excuses. You may not notice it immediately, but over time, what you tolerate quietly becomes what you live with. Raising your standards begins with a decision that you will no longer accept less from yourself than you are capable of giving. It means finishing what you start, even when enthusiasm fades. It means choosing discipline over convenience, honesty over comfort, growth over familiarity. This is not about perfection, it is about alignment. When your actions match the level of life you claim to want, progress becomes inevitable. When they don't, frustration grows because you are living in conflict with your own potential. Your standards also shape the people you keep around you. If you tolerate constant negativity, lack of accountability, or complacency, those attitudes will eventually influence your own. Environment is powerful because it normalizes behavior. If everyone around you settles, settling starts to feel reasonable. But when you surround yourself with people who challenge themselves, who follow through, who expect more from life, your perspective shifts. You begin to see that higher standards are not extreme. They are necessary for anyone serious about change. There is discomfort in this process because raising your standards requires letting go of what no longer fits them. That might mean walking away from habits that once felt harmless, distancing yourself from situations that drain your focus, or saying no to opportunities that do not align with your direction. At first, it can feel like loss. You may question whether you are being too strict, too demanding, too different. But that discomfort is evidence that you are moving beyond what kept you stagnant. Growth often feels like isolation before it feels like empowerment. As your standards rise, so does your sense of self-respect. You start trusting your decisions because they are guided by principles rather than impulses. You waste less time negotiating with yourself because the expectation is already set. You don't debate whether to do the work. You do it because that is who you have decided to be. This clarity removes a tremendous amount of mental noise. Instead of drifting, you move with intention. Eventually, the results begin to show, not as sudden transformation, but as steady improvement. Opportunities appear that once felt out of reach because you have become someone prepared to handle them. Your relationships become more supportive because they are built on mutual respect rather than convenience. Your confidence strengthens because it is backed by consistent action. You realize that upgrading your life was never about luck or timing. It was about raising the minimum of what you were willing to accept from yourself and from the world around you. When you refuse to tolerate what weakens you, you create space for what strengthens you. That is the quiet power of higher standards. They do not guarantee an easy path, but they ensure a meaningful one. And once you experience the difference between living by default and living by design, you understand that the quality of your life will always rise or fall to meet the level of what you decide is no longer acceptable. The most powerful transformations in life are rarely announced. They are built in silence, in moments no one else witnesses, and in decisions that never make the highlight reel. The world sees only the result, the finished product, the person who handles challenges with grace or achieves something remarkable. What nobody sees is the countless mornings you woke up before your alarm, the hours you spent learning when others were distracted, the small, invisible choices to push a little harder even when no one was watching. That is where real work happens. That is where character is forged. There is a temptation to broadcast effort, to seek validation for your struggles before the outcome exists. Social media, casual conversations, even friends and colleagues can subtly encourage this, making it seem necessary to prove your commitment. But sharing too soon dilutes the process. Effort becomes performative, and growth becomes dependent on recognition rather than discipline. The world doesn't need to see your journey. It needs to see the result. Quiet preparation creates power because it allows you to focus fully on mastery without distraction, without judgment, without the pressure of external opinion shaping your every move. Training in silence also cultivates patience. You learn that excellence is not immediate, that skills are built through repetition, and that the visible breakthrough is only the tip of the iceberg. Every repetition, every failure, every correction adds up in ways that are imperceptible in the moment but undeniable over time. This is why those who appear overnight successful have actually been working quietly for years. The sweat, discipline, and unseen struggle compound into results that speak louder than any promise, post, or announcement ever could. Performing in reality requires courage because it exposes your private effort to public scrutiny. Once you step into the arena, once you show the results of your work, people will notice, judge, and respond, not to the process, but to the product. That is where confidence is tested. Your preparation must be so thorough, your focus so disciplined, that external reaction no longer dictates your sense of self. When you have done the work in silence, you don't rely on applause to validate your progress. You rely on your preparation, your consistency, your private victories, and they carry you through every challenge. There is also a freedom in working quietly. It removes comparison, envy, and distraction from your growth. When you are not performing for the audience before the achievement, you are free to experiment, fail, and improve without fear. Mistakes are lessons, not public failures. Progress is measured by your own standards, not by someone else's timeline. You cultivate mastery for the sake of mastery, excellence for the sake of excellence, and character for the sake of character. And when the moment comes to perform in reality, the impact is undeniable. People are drawn to competence, confidence, and results because they cannot be faked. What you have built privately translates seamlessly into influence, opportunity, and success. Others see only the peak, but you know the climb it took to get there. That awareness, the knowledge of every silent hour, every deliberate effort, becomes unshakable confidence. You realize that true power is invisible until it is undeniable, and the world will always respect results far more than promises. Quiet work creates loud success. Private discipline delivers public triumph. The person who masters this principle understands that recognition is earned after the effort, not during it, and that the life-changing rewards of working on yourself are always reserved for those willing to endure the unseen journey. At the end of the day, the most important person you need to answer to is yourself. The world can applaud, criticize, ignore, or misunderstand everything you do, but none of that ultimately defines you. True respect begins internally, with the choices you make when nobody is watching. It is the ability to act in alignment with your values, to honor your commitments to yourself, and to stand by your principles even when it is inconvenient, uncomfortable, or lonely. When you cultivate that kind of integrity, external approval becomes secondary, because the person you see in the mirror is enough to demand excellence from every action and decision. Becoming someone you respect requires honesty with yourself. You cannot build self-respect on illusions, excuses, or half measures. You have to look at your habits, your routines, your fears, and your patterns without flinching, and ask yourself whether they reflect the person you aspire to be. Every compromise you make, every corner you cut, chips away at your sense of integrity, and over time, it erodes the foundation of self-respect. The work is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront your weaknesses and own your failures, but that confrontation is what transforms character. The more willing you are to face yourself without excuse, the stronger your inner authority becomes. Self-respect is also built through consistency. It is not a single grand gesture, a heroic act, or a moment of perfect decision-making. It is the accumulation of everyday choices that reinforce your values and demonstrate that you can be trusted. Showing up for yourself when it would be easier to quit, speaking the truth when lying is convenient, taking responsibility when blaming would be simpler. These are the moments that quietly build a sense of personal honor. Over time, they create a confidence that cannot be shaken by criticism or circumstance, because it comes from evidence, not perception. The people who respect themselves also hold themselves accountable. They do not wait for others to point out mistakes or failures because they have already set standards that they refuse to violate. They take ownership of their lives, knowing that growth requires responsibility. Mistakes are not reasons for shame or avoidance, but opportunities to learn and adjust. Accountability strengthens self-respect because it affirms that you are reliable, dependable, and capable of governing your own life with integrity. That is far more powerful than any validation you could receive from outside sources. Respecting yourself also means setting boundaries that protect your time, energy, and principles. You cannot truly honor yourself if you allow toxic influences, distractions, or negative patterns to control your decisions. Saying no when it aligns with your priorities, walking away from situations that undermine your standards, and choosing growth over ease are all acts of self-respect. Each boundary you enforce signals that you value yourself enough to refuse mediocrity, complacency, or compromise that conflicts with your vision for who you want to become. Ultimately, becoming someone you respect transforms the way you experience life. You move with purpose rather than drift in reaction to circumstance. You make choices based on integrity rather than convenience. You measure success not by applause or recognition, but by the quiet knowledge that you are living in alignment with your values. When the world challenges you, when others doubt you, or when failure occurs, it matters less because your respect for yourself is unshakable. That inner authority becomes the foundation for everything else, the discipline, courage, and resilience required to achieve what you once thought impossible. At the end of the day, nothing is more powerful than being able to meet your own gaze in the mirror and know that the person looking back is worthy of admiration, trust, and respect.